saying what a wonderful win George Russell did. Turns out he may well face a disqualification. There was not enough fuel in his car. There was not enough fuel in his car at the end of the race to do a sample. That does happen sometimes. The most recent time I think it happened was, I think, Spain with Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton got pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix a little while back in the McLaren years, and he finished. He essentially ran out of fuel at the end of the qualifying. What happened then was they were not able to take enough fuel to get a measurement for the fuel sample. Now, you might hear, why could that be a problem? Well, the reason this could be a problem is when you're trying to get some kind of fuel, when you're trying to get fuel from somewhere, you need enough to analyze. Now, the theory goes, potentially, that the theory goes that George Russell, if they can't get enough fuel for a decent measurement, who knows? I appreciate it's probably not going to happen. I don't think Mercedes would ever risk doing this, but who knows as to whether Mercedes had illegal fuel in the car. I'm not suggesting for 1 second they have, but if there is not enough fuel to measure, then the issue, if there's not enough fuel to measure, the issue is that George Russell could potentially face disqualification. That is a disqualification offence. So for anyone that just joined us, breaking news is, it's not been confirmed yet, but George Russell could face disqualification from the Belgian Grand Prix, meaning Lewis Hamilton wins, everyone goes up and plays, Lewis Hamilton wins, which is not a way Lewis would really want to win it. I think Lewis knows he got beaten on the day by George Russell. Now, there was talk about, oh no, Mercedes screwed Lewis. You know, they gave him a disadvantageous strategy, which I completely understand it could potentially be a bit of an issue. But with the strategy that Lewis had, I still think he could have won the race. I still think the race was his to lose. Even with 3 laps to go, he was right behind George Russell. There was a couple of times when he could have got alongside George Russell. But as I said in my last video, going into La Source, Lewis ended up locking up twice. And basically, George Russell getting much better exit out of La Source. And all the way, I mean, you don't touch the brakes, you don't let go of the throttle until you get to the braking at Le Coup. So there we go. But George Russell potentially facing disqualification from the Belgian Grand Prix once again because his, I believe from the little I know, it's so frustrating. No, I don't support Trump or Harris. It is so frustrating that George Russell, his win could be taken away from what was a silly error by Mercedes. I mean, he had what I can only explain was a potentially a historical win. You know, lasting what, 3/4 of the race, 2/3 to 3/4 of the Belgian Grand Prix on the same tyres. On those tyres, he lasted, and then for him and Mercedes not to have the right amount of fuel to be able to read, ergo, he is potentially disqualified. It's absolutely atrocious / unforgivable. Slane, you are fun at pirates, I bet. Okay, thanks. Okay, bruv, I get a bit by wash and bang. Okay, fair enough. Thanks. Crisps. So, I mean, that's the issue. So George Russell potentially disqualified from the Belgian Grand Prix. Not great, I know. As I said, it hasn't been made official yet. Now, the last time, from what I remember, something like that happened was, I think, all the Spanish Grand Prix, Hamilton got pole position, and it was taken away from him because there was not enough fuel after qualifying to measure in the tank. I'm sure it may have happened since. I specifically remember that. Why? Because, funny enough, that then led to Williams's most recent win with a certain Pastor Maldonado. I want to say 2012. I'm not 100% sure of the year. And then that same day, the Williams motorhome decided to ignite itself. Sad. But yeah, So potentially, George Russell could be disqualified from the Belgian Grand Prix. I will give you guys any other updates. But there we go. Fingers crossed, and we'll see. So, George Russell. I'm in absolute shock. Anyway, I think I've spoken enough. I will be back with another breaking if and when that becomes official. So, as I said, George Russell potentially losing his Belgian Grand Prix, which is sad. And what I'm going to quickly, they're also saying now that George Russell's car was potentially below the minimum weight as well. Now, if that's the case, that's a slam dunk. That's a slam dunk. If that's the case, that's a slam dunk. That's a slam dunk DQ from and Lewis Hamilton wins. Apparently, on Twitter at the moment, they're suggesting that all the other cars have passed, but George Russell's hasn't, below the minimum weight. Now, if George Russell's car is indeed below the minimum rate, that's a slam dunk disqualification. How on earth can Mercedes let that happen? I mean, George Russell won what was a fantastic race. The tyre whisperer. Yes, the tyres were looking good. Yes, I'm sure Lewis Hamilton potentially could have won with the same strategy. It wasn't. Lewis Hamilton, I think, maybe choked to the last couple of laps. He could have potentially won in the DRS, and I've no doubt another few laps he probably would have passed George Russell. He looked up at the source, ergo he lost his chance. He lost any chance he had, I think, of winning that race. In a normal situation. But if George Russell's car is underweight, definitely that is a slam dunk. As I said, I don't know that much information at the moment. It's not been, I don't think at the time of recording this, he's not been officially DQ'd. But as I keep saying, if his car is underweight, then most certainly wasn't George told to lift and coast, but didn't. Well, if that's the case, then that's not that. Maybe well on George. If George was indeed told to lift and coast, there is every chance that he may well have lost, and that will be his if they suspected that was the case. I mean, that's going to be interesting. So George Russell potentially facing disqualification either because there wasn't enough fuel, or as other people have suggested, I think on the Twitters, that George Russell's car, was underweight, which is, let's be fair, which is going to be a massive shame for what was, I think, a much better victory than Austria. I mean, let's be honest, the Austrian victory was kind of like handed to him, wasn't it? With these shenanigans of Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, which was kind of sad. But yeah, so George Russell potentially facing disqualification. What I'm going to do, I think it might cut out for a second. I'm just going to refresh the Twitter. And then we're going to have a quick look. I'll come back in a second because I don't know if it's free. The most recent thing I've got is the car was weighed. George Russell's car was weighed, and I think it was around 1.5-ish kilograms underweight. I think that was maybe after the fuel was drained out. So after the fuel was drained out, remember the cars I think are weighed. They've got to be so many. I think 800 kilograms. Quite heavy, isn't it? I think it's 800 kilograms. I'll just wait for the motorcycle to go by. Look at that. Check it out. Awesome. Yeah, so 800 kilograms, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the car needs to weigh. But Leclerc is hot. Yeah, he is. 800 kilograms, the car was 1.5 kilograms under. If that's the case, that is going to be an absolute slam dunk disqualification for George Russell, which is a massive shame. So George Russell potentially going to be disqualified from the Belgian Grand Prix because of weight. I mean, if indeed he was told to lift and coast at the end, that probably wouldn't have been that may have been an issue if it was the fuel thing. But sadly, if George was told to lift and coast, then that still potentially would have rendered him for a DQ, simply because once they drain the fuel out of the car, the car still would have been about 1.5 kilograms underweight, which really sucks for George. I mean, he's won what is an amazing race. He's beaten the 7 times world champion, arguably at his own game at saving tyres. And then that happens. And then that happens. He's potentially disqualified. So, as I understand, all the cars have been weighed, including George's. George Russell's, yeah? How was George? There you go. Say hello to everyone. Hey, was George Russell disqualified, maybe, isn't he? Yeah, George Russell potentially disqualified because his car, Alexander, was underweight. Yes. What does that mean? A kilogram? That could be a couple of tenths a lap, couldn't it? At the very least. So stay tuned here. Very likely to be a DQ. That question. Yes, it is very likely to be a DQ. Absolutely. No, I'm not James Corden. But there we go. But moving on. Yes, I'm live. Would say hello. Hello. Okay. She doesn't. The fiance does not want to say hello, sadly. But George Russell, what do you think about George Russell being disqualified? Not good. Not good at all. So there we go. We'll speak to you soon. I'll keep you up to date on any other updates. It's just absolutely mental, isn't it? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate that. It's been amazing. It's just fantastic that so many of you can tune in for what is essentially a live video down by the beach. Ridiculous, isn't it? Okay, we'll speak to you soon. I'll have an update.